All right, welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you happen to be. My name is Tom Campbell. I am the program manager for the Traumatic Brain Injury State Partnership Program in the Administration for Community Living here at the Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you for joining us today for our second TBI Tuesday session. Today's session is about sustainable partnerships, forging relationships that last. This is the second of 5 TBI Tuesday sessions in observance of March being Brain Injury Awareness Month. And it is in lieu of our normal, ACL's normal annual TBI Stakeholder Day that is usually held in person, which we could not do this year for COVID reasons, of course. But in lieu of that, we've expanded the day. We're now having 5 sessions. So we're doing more hours, more content, and that's exciting. We're also excited for the opportunity to do these virtual because that allows us to invite other guests that maybe couldn't have come, but also to invite more stakeholders and to have more stakeholders join us. Today, we've got 308 registrations, so we're excited about that number. That's a really great group of folks, and I'm sure that I want to get to just a minute who's with us. So this webinar is hosted by the TBI Technical Assistance and Resource Center. That's the ACL funded TA provider for the TBI State Partnership Program grants, but also a resource center to all stakeholders. All of our webinars this month, are free and open to the public. So invite your friends. If you are enjoying this, there are 3 more afterwards. Today's session is, all of the sessions are highlighting the work of our grantees, the State Partnership Program grantees, and the grantee work groups. Our grantees get together, they do a couple of different things. One of the things obviously is to work in their states to increase the access to services and supports for individuals with TBI. There are 27 grantees, all told, 27 states. They all work together in a variety of work groups. The work groups we're highlighting those work groups this year in the TBI Tuesday. So there's 9 work groups overall, but there's 5 that we're really highlighting through these sessions. Last week's session was on underserved populations, which is the underserved population work group. This week, it's the Sustainable Partnerships work group. We'll hear much more from them in just a few minutes. Other sessions that we are looking forward to, the next 3 sessions will be hosted by the Criminal and Juvenile Justice work group, the Return to Learn, Return to Play work group, and the Survivor Engagement work group. The Survivor Engagement work group talking about survivor engagement in advisory boards and other aspects of the program. We are also trying as best we can to highlight our federal partners and other partners in the work of our grantees. And so you'll see some of that as well. So before we tell you any more about today's session, I want to give you some logistics. So participants, all of you are in listen-only mode during the webinar. If you need to get a hold of us or ask a question, please use the chat feature in Zoom, and you will be able to communicate with the hosts that way. We will address your questions as time allows us to. If there's too many, obviously we can't do that. There will be specific times during the webinar when we stop presenting and answer some questions. We are live captioning the webinar in English, and also providing an American Sign Language interpreter. And if you don't see the captioning, there should be a button at the bottom of your screen. If you move your cursor, it should show up. It's on the right side on the bottom to turn on the captioning. This live webinar is interactive. We are going to be asking some questions. We'll be doing some polls. You'll have the opportunity to respond to poll questions in just a second. And then later on in the presentations. So pay attention, and we'd love to have your input. Next slide. After the webinar, if you have follow-up questions or feedback for us, please use this email, TBI at hsri.org. They are our facilitators today and the TA provider that for our grantees. Please note, this email is not being monitored during the webinar. If you have a question during the webinar, a problem needing some assistance, please use the chat feature in Zoom. A recording of the webinar and also a PDF of all of these slides will be available on the ACL website, acl.gov, some point, not immediately after the webinar, but at some point in the next few days. So that brings us to a question about who is here. We'd like to know who's in the audience. There's a poll that has just shown up on your screen. So we'd like you to self-identify, and there's several different options here. Please choose all that apply. Please, the first is a person with a traumatic brain injury or other disability. If you're also a self-advocate, if you're a peer mentor, a social worker, a family member of somebody with a TBI, a researcher, service provider, you may be many of these things. Please check all that apply, and then I will leave that open for a few more seconds, and Connor will turn it off, and then we'll tell you what the input has been, what the outcome. All right. We've got a lot of government employees. That's the main one, and that's not surprising because our state and federal partners are, and our tribal partners are excellent, and they are very excellent partners. We've got service providers, researchers, social workers. We've got 22% of you are social workers or counselors. 17% of you are self-advocates, excellent, and 13% are people with traumatic brain injury. We're so glad you're here. Let us know what it is we are doing well and what it is we're not doing well. At the end of the session, there will be a feedback form that pops up very much like this one, and it's very easy to respond to. So we'd like to get your feedback at that point too. All right, so now I'm going to introduce the content providers for the day. First, I'd like to introduce and welcome Ashley Bridgman. Ashley is from my home state of Tennessee. She is the program director of the Tennessee Department of Health, our state partnership program grantee, and she's going to introduce herself, talk about today's session and the speakers, and a little bit about the Sustainability Partnership Grantee Work Group, which was absolutely instrumental and has done a lot of work putting together today's session for you all. So I'd like to welcome Ashley. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. I know that everybody is very, very busy. As Tom said, my name is Ashley Bridgman, and I am the Traumatic Brain Injury Program Director at the Tennessee Department of Health. And I'm just quickly going to review the agenda for today, talk about who will be speaking, and just, as Tom said, a brief overview of the Sustainable Partnerships Work Group. So for part one this afternoon, we're going to do the overview of the work group. Then we're going to highlight two of the products that the Sustainable Partnerships Work Group has developed. Then we're going to have a little bit of a presentation and discussion on building successful partnerships within a state, forging relationships between different states. And next slide, please. And then after that, we're going to take a quick break from about 2:05 to 2:30 Eastern Time. And depending on how quickly or slowly we get through the first half of the webinar, it may be a little bit earlier, or that break may be just a little bit later. Then after we come back from the break, we're going to be talking about creating and sustaining partnerships with federal entities. And then we're going to have a facilitated discussion with our very own Dana Fink. And then next slide, please. I'm going to quickly introduce our speakers for today. So our federal partner speakers, first is Dave Boyer, and he is with the National Disability Rights Network. Joseph Lugo, who is with the Administration for Community Living. Next slide, please. And then our state ACL speakers today will be Kenesha Tate, and she is with the Brain and Spinal Injury Trust Fund Commission with Georgia. Maggie Ferguson, who is the Brain Injury and Disability Program Manager with the Iowa Department of Public Health. Scott Collins, who is the Brain Injury Services Branch Manager with the Department of Aging and Independent Living in Kentucky. Next slide, please. We'll have Anastasia Edmonston, who is the project coordinator with the Maryland Behavioral Health Administration. Gabriella Lawrence Soto, who is the Learning and Development coordinator with Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission. We're going to have Jola Yemi Aha Mia Oj, who is the Injury Prevention Project Coordinator with the Rhode Island Department of Health. And then finally, myself, Ashley Bridgman, and Paula Denslow, who I work closely with. She is the Brain Links Program Director at the Tennessee Disability Coalition. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of the Sustainable Partnerships Work Group. Participating states have come together during this grant cycle to work on products that can help states kind of have a better understanding on how to develop sustainable partnerships for this specific work group. And so our participating states have been Georgia, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Maryland, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Tennessee. And as just discussed, the purpose of this work group is to develop usable products that are relative to sustainable partnerships. And this work group has created two products. First is the Success Story product, and the second is the Collaboration Tip Sheet product. And this product kind of dives into how to create and maintain sustainable partnerships, especially after when funding has ended. And we're going to go ahead and dive into those two products. And I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who is Maggie Ferguson, and she is with the Iowa Department of Public Health. Thanks, Maggie.
Thanks, Ashley. As she said, I'm Maggie Ferguson, and I'm with the Iowa Department of Public Health. I'm the Brain Injury and Disability Program Manager there. I'm a Caucasian woman with shoulder-length straight blonde hair, and today I'm wearing a yellow shirt with a cream-colored cardigan, and I'm using a headset, and I have a Zoom background that is blue with a green brain injury awareness ribbon. Next slide, please. So when the Sustainable Partnership Work Group started meeting, the group's discussions initially were focused on getting to know each other and developing this group as we would any other new partnership. So we focused our conversations as well on sharing the types of partners that we work with, as well as the various strategies that we use to strengthen and grow those partnerships. The group, being mindful that we needed to produce some products, also discussed, really the importance of highlighting our work and what tools could be used by our existing partners, as well as to engage new partners. The first strategy that we identified that wasn't being broadly used by the work group members, but recognized as having the potential to be highly impactful was the development of success stories. So on your screen, we have a sample success story template that uses a one-page layout and outlines the various types of information that can be included in a success story. At the top of the page, there's a space to include your organization's logo on a banner that identifies this document as being a success story. Below the banner is space for a headline or subtitle for the subject of the success story. For this particular one-page layout, this sample on the screen is divided into 2 columns. One side has a shaded background where a photo can be included along with information such as contact information and website links for strategic partners, or where you want to lead a reader to find more information such as awareness materials regarding your topic, more details about the project being highlighted in this success story, or even a report that was published related to the work. The other half of the document is really the body of the success story. For this sample, the story was broken into 3 sections. The first section serves as an introduction. It may include background information as to why you started this project, as well as what the goal of the project was or the need. And this is also a good section for including data if you have any. The next section is used to summarize the approach that you used and the partners involved. The third section describes the process and outcome measures that were achieved by the project. Not included on the sample, but could be shared as part of the document, are next steps or lessons learned. So along the bottom of the document in smaller print, we wanted to make sure that acknowledgement language was included, and we had a placeholder for the date that the document was developed so that it kind of anchors in time when that document was published. There's also a space for your organization's name and a web link in that lower bottom section. And on this sample, we included a logo for a key partner. Specifically on this sample, we used the TBI State Partnership Programs logo. So throughout years 1 and year 2, the group continued to discuss and share strategies that we used to identify, form, and sustain our partnerships. Our group agreed that partnerships were the secret sauce to not only the project, but sustaining the work, even when the funding had ended. So this leads to our next product, which was a tip sheet summarizing those various strategies. So next slide, please. So the front page of the tip sheet is shown on the screen right now. We titled it Collaboration Tips, Grant Successes for after funding has ended. This tip sheet includes our recommendations regarding building collaborations that last. First, we started with identifying the partners, and this included engaging new partners, working with current and previous partners where we've had successes, and when appropriate, contracting with partners to either do the work on our behalf or to provide that carrot to get them engaged. The group also discussed the importance of being there for our partners or providing value to the relationship. This includes providing the partner with information they can use or share, attending or participating in their meetings, offering letters of support for their projects, sponsoring events, and providing education or technical assistance to their team. There are also activities that can be mutually beneficial, such as offering to review funding applications or RFPs for each other, and collaborating on projects led by our partners. And I apologize, I used an acronym. I'm going to go back and explain what that was. I said RFPs, and that's requests for proposals. Next slide. So the image on the screen now is the second page of the tip sheet, and includes suggestions for determining the level of engagement your partners might have in your work, as not all partners are created equal or being at the same level of engagement, but they're still valuable partners regardless of what level they're at in your engagement. And it's useful to have those partners at various stages as being involved in your work. So the document also includes a lot of tips for keeping partners engaged. While the tip sheet may seem like a lot of common sense, we as a group really felt it was important to capture the recommendations that we came up with so that they could be referenced as a reminder to the important role that partners play in our work, as well as a reminder that we need to be intentional and strategic at all phases of forming, establishing, and maintaining our partnerships, as well as the importance of being a good partner. So next slide. So that was a very quick overview of our products that we had produced in years 1 and 2. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you had regarding our work group or the products. And I would invite any of my fellow work group members to chime in as well. And I'm not sure how to get the questions, if there are any.
Maggie, I can read them to you.
Okay.
So far you have a comment that thank you so much for these. They look beautiful. And then a question is the success stories tip sheet. Who is this sent to? With whom is it shared?
Well, we produced it as a product to really share amongst the fellow grantees. But we can also, that was kind of just as general information and sharing, because we had several people. Really, the background for the development of that particular product was because we had acknowledgement within our group that a lot of times with the grant, we really need to rely on those partners to continue the work after we are gone. So when our funding is ended, and sometimes the person who has been responsible for that work goes away. And so we wanted to provide those suggestions that we had as a group in a format that could be useful for others, because the people in the group felt like the tips that we had compiled were very useful just for our own use. So really it was meant for other grantees.
Great, that's all I'm seeing right now, Maggie.
Okay.
If you have other questions, please put them in the chat.
All right. Well, then I would like to kick it off next to Stacia Edmondson from Maryland.
Thank you, Maggie. I am a Caucasian woman with mostly silver hair. I'm wearing glasses and my headset. So I'm going to talk about a partnership that we have in our state of Maryland. And next slide, please. There's Maryland over to the right side of the screen in red, a small but mighty state. Next slide, please. So I work within the Maryland Behavioral Health Administration. That's the lead agency in our state for brain injury. And our partners are also part of the broader Department of Health in the state of Maryland. And within that Department of Health is the Office of Public Health Improvement. And that's where the opioid response overdose coordinator and her staff reside. And then dispersed throughout the state are the local county health departments. And so those are the partners that we work with that I'm going to talk about today. We have 24 jurisdictions. That includes Baltimore City. So there's about 24 overdose fatality review coordinators, and they all lead a team that review overdoses of people who've passed quarterly. So they will not review everybody formally that has passed of an overdose in their jurisdiction, but at least 4 cases a quarter. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So laying the groundwork, and this started several years ago. There was somebody who worked at the overdose fatality review at headquarters, and she worked with all the coordinators, and she actually, Laura Bartholomew-Hill, she's one of our project consultants, I'm happy to say at this point. But Laura said, I think there's a connection that we're seeing on the overdose fatality reviews between traumatic brain injury. So it's been more than just a few people who we have reviewed who passed of an overdose, who in their history, medical history or family report or professional report, had a history of traumatic brain injury. And we, on the brain injury side of things, we know that people who survive overdoses can emerge with what is referred to as an acquired brain injury. So that would be some functional problems associated with the lack of oxygen to their brain, which was the result of the overdose. So we realized this was something we really need to start talking about within our training. And so I do a lot of trainings, and before the epidemic, I was doing about 50 trainings a year across the state, and was always including, after we made that link, that partnership, include the relationship. And the information, of course, and the research was changing rapidly around the connection between traumatic brain injury, opioid use and overdose, and acquired brain injury. And a lot of those trainings did occur with our partners at the local health departments, attended by mental health and addiction professionals, including our peer specialists. Our behavioral health administration has robust workforce of people with lived experience who support people who are either in recovery or in services and working on the recovery journey throughout our state. So they've been incredible partners, and we're hoping to develop that a little bit more. Next slide, please. So these are some of the opportunities that kind of led us to where we are now. We were really fortunate to have a very smart young lady who came to us from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And she was actually in medical school and took a break to get her master's in public health. So she was very interested in brain injury. She was very interested in addiction medicine. And so she spent a year with us being mentored by myself and Laura Bartholomew-Hill, and really immersing her in the world of addiction and treatment, specifically opioids. And then I shared with her and took her to several of our brain injury programs and immersed her in the brain injury literature. And culminating at the end of her internship was a presentation to her peers at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. She created our first tip sheet, and she also joined Laura and I to present at our statewide behavioral health conference. So we wanted to make the awareness, the connection kind of across our networks within the behavioral health system. So that state conference was a really good place to kind of do that. And then my last bullet there in bold, because this is a huge accomplishment, and it's only because our partners were so receptive to learning about this intersection, is that acquired brain injury history is now included in the overdose fatality review dashboard, which was rolled out in 2018. So this formalized and made consistent across all jurisdictions the information that the coordinators gather through interview, through the team within their health department. They gather the information on the decedent or the people who have passed of an overdose, and they look at their medical history, their educational history, any interaction with law enforcement, parole and probation, the folks that they may have worked with to support them and their families. So there's a lot of information that's gathered, and right from the get-go when that was rolled out, we have an item on acquired brain injury. Was that in somebody's past? Next slide, please. So moving on, I was invited to attend the bi-monthly overdose fatality review technical assistance call. And that just gave me more opportunity to talk about brain injury and how it might be a factor in some of the things that they're seeing in the jurisdictions. Was invited at the recommendation of someone at the Maryland Public Health Administration at the National Opioid Fatality Review Forum in Washington, D.C. And that was attended by a number of states who also have overdose fatality review within their state. Just to introduce the whole notion that brain injury is something you need to be aware of and look for in a person's history. And one of the things that I'm so happy that came about this past year was I was invited to be a formal member of Prince George's County, Maryland's overdose fatality review team. There's a bunch of really forward-thinking, incredible collaborators within that county who are very interested in brain injury. So I attend those meetings every quarter. I'm able to look at the individuals who have passed as they do what they call the social autopsy, and really try to peel back the onion to see if there might have been a brain injury in that person's history. And then what can we do to help other people so they don't fall into that gap and perhaps exacerbate behavioral health issues that could lead to opioid problematic opioid use and death. So that was huge. And it might be too soon to announce, but it may happen within the next 6 months that they're going to include traumatic brain injury, ABI, acquired brain injury screening into their protocols at the county jail. So fingers crossed for that. And then we've just been inviting our friends at the health departments, local health departments. In this last bullet was the Baltimore County Department of Health and their educator on opioids. The community educator came with 2 certified peer specialists, presented with me, and then set a table up and was able to certify people, attendees at the conference, at our Brain Injury Association's annual state conference, on how to administer naloxone, and everybody left with a naloxone kit. Next slide, please. So more and more, as people know about the resources regarding brain injury located within our administration, I'm getting case consultations. People will shoot me an email. Gee, we got this person who passed. I'm thinking that they had a brain injury. Can you come to our meeting and talk about brain injury? Or after signing some releases, I actually will go to counties and participate in a review meeting to talk about specific individuals or all of the individuals that they may review at that meeting, and look at their cases through a brain injury informed lens. And to see the light bulbs go off is really what we're looking for. We're looking for people to go, oh, that might be the missing connection. Recently, a woman who works in parole and probation says, I've got to get that screening into our system. So I don't know if she's done that yet, but the light bulb went off for her. Maryland's been really fortunate to get the Centers for Disease Control's Data to Action grant and have hired additional staff, including an epidemiologist and a local innovative surveillance coordinator. And that gentleman was able to attend the National Association's Day Head Injury Administrators, supported by our grant, to attend that conference. So really trying to immerse people in brain injury and brain injury considerations, especially around drug use and opioids specifically. And the last bullet is that I gave some feedback to the Comprehensive Opioid Stimulant and Substance Abuse Program, or COSAP. They're the ones that sponsor the forum, the Opioid Review Forum. And they put together this huge guidance for teams across the country, what to look for when conducting overdose fatality review. And they included lots and lots of data, didn't include brain injury. And so I contacted the person who had sent this this guidance out, and I said, gee, I'm wondering, you might remember, we talked last year when I showed up at your forum, that maybe brain injury is something you want to include. And so she said that is a work in progress, so fingers crossed they will include brain injury in the next edition. Meanwhile, she asked me to come and speak last month at their conference on a panel. So I was with some other folks and was able to, again, insert that information about brain injury that we believe everybody needs to have on their radar in behavioral health, and specifically in this case regarding the use of opioids and the risk for folks who have a history of brain injury. Next slide, please. So this slide just highlights the materials that we have created during the course of the Maryland Traumatic Brain Injury Partner Grant. We have fact sheets, we have PowerPoints and resources related to the intersection of brain injury and opioids. So I welcome you to check those out. And if you have any questions, of course, you can certainly be in contact with myself. So next slide, please. So some of the challenges, as everybody in the country and the world experienced the pandemic, the local overdose fatality review teams essentially stopped operating for a period of time in a formal way because they are located within the health departments, all hands on deck for the pandemic, as I'm sure you can appreciate. But they got back up and running and figured out how to do these very confidential meetings online. And so back in June, in May last year, they started ramping up again. So everybody is pretty much back up to speed. And though I mentioned that having acquired brain injury on the overdose fatality review dashboard was a huge accomplishment, in retrospect, I see a glaring hole. It does not specify non-fatal overdose as a possible cause of acquired brain injury. So I'm not sure how that happened because we had lots of conversations. I probably wasn't clear enough. But anyway, what you see there is a pretty darn good definition. So acquired brain injury, if team member reports indicate a history of acquired brain injury, mark the checkbox. If reports do not indicate a history of acquired brain injury or status is unknown, do not check the checkbox. Acquired brain injuries include concussions and other traumatic brain injury, stroke, and other brain damage incurred in events after birth. So neurodegenerative disorders or congenital disorders, including fetal alcohol syndrome, are not, all caps, considered to be acquired brain injury. So it's pretty comprehensive. And we're so glad it's on the radar. There are some challenges because if it's not in the medical history, then it won't be recorded. And that's why we need the overdose fatality review teams to really be able to look at a person's history through a brain injury informed lens. Next slide, please. So what do we want moving forward? We're going to continue to give that assistance to overdose fatality review teams. I'm always up to be invited to be a full member of any of the other teams. They're all very receptive. We continue educating and training our local health department staff and their partners about brain injury with a focus on identifying people who may have a history of brain injury, how to accommodate folks so that they can really get into programming and treatment and engage and stay in treatment and benefit from it. We have our first post-shutdown, it's going to be done virtually, behavioral health training for one of our local health departments in St. Mary's County in May. So Martin Kerrigan, another one of our consultants, is going to join me for that. And then we're going to hope, fingers crossed, that we will be able to expand the training and coaching of Maryland's peer specialists. I've done several trainings with them over the years, and they are a group of people that just get brain injury right away and want to support the people that they work with across the state. So we had a kind of a pilot 4-part series, 2.5 hours each session, with a group of 24 Maryland peer specialists, myself and Martin Kerrigan. And it was very well received, and we hope to expand that because they are the folks that provide that wraparound treatment for people who are in recovery, not only from issues with addiction and substances, but also mental health challenges. So I wanna thank you, and I'm done, and I want to welcome Paula Denslow, my colleague from Tennessee, who is the director of the Brain Links program.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Paula Denslow, and I am the director of Brain Links. I am a Caucasian woman with shoulder-length brown hair, and it's starting to streak with some gray tones, which is pretty cool. I feel like I've earned them. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Tennessee Disability Coalition. It is an alliance of organizations and individuals who have joined together to promote the full and equal participation of people with disabilities in all aspects of life. We rely, as an organization, we rely on the grassroots support from people and families across the state. And the work of self-advocates and small local groups is critically important to the success of all of our goals. The coalition is a member organization and it represents, as I said, statewide efforts. It goes across, we support people of every age, every economic background, political persuasion, as well as disability. BrainLinks is a program of the Tennessee Disability Coalition. We are an army of 4 strong. We provide trainings across the state, professional staff development trainings. And we do these, we had already done these trainings professionally via online as well as in person. And then with the shift of COVID and coincidentally, time frame wise, Tennessee sustained several deadly tornadoes across this time period last year, as a matter of fact. And we are still regrouping from the devastation and the loss from a lot of those tornadoes that has touched down. But we are an army of 4 and we provide professional staff development. As with any good relationship, we talked about this as part of a work group early on. We felt as a team, we couldn't talk about extending and creating new partnerships and without getting to know each other first. So we took time as an ACL work group, Administration for Community Living work group, to really get to know each other. And that took time. We had to navigate how we managed our monthly calls and the way we communicate. But it was all really, really a good thing because it strengthened the work of this work group, as you could see by the products that have already been shared. One of the things that I wanted to share with you today is about the relationships that we had in Tennessee. Next slide, please. Thank you. We started, the Tennessee Disability Coalition formed a wonderful alliance and partnership with Tennessee's Department of Health, the Traumatic Brain Injury Program. This goes way back into the late 1990s. And as you can see, we're in 2021 and our partnership, I like to say friendship, has continued and has really shown strength over the test of time. As you know, whether it's an economic change, it's across the board, we have been able to flourish and thrive in many areas through this relationship. With a couple of years ago, in preparation for this grant cycle, we reached out and began discussions with our Tennessee Department of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. They were extremely receptive when we talked about getting to know each other. The slide indicates how it all started. We began meetings with our person-centered practice leadership across the state. As we were trying to learn about their organization, we realized that we had a lot of common goals. Both groups wanted to share and educate as best we could our information and resources. So we stopped and we listened and learned what person-centered practice really meant. We were committed early on with our grant that we would make sure that all of our materials and in our communication that we would always be person-centered minded and make sure that that we were doing all we could to meaningfully engage people that we got to know and work with. So the person-centered practice team offers a certification, or you can take courses and learn how to be person-centered, which we all did, and as well as the Traumatic Brain Injury Program leaders. So we did this together. But as our relationship grew and over time, we were then introduced to some of the different departments or divisions across our across the developmental and intellectual disabilities group. Intake and case management expanded, conversations started, and through all of these, we began to build, it was almost like a trickling down effect. We began to build respect and great admiration for each other's work and what we could all bring to the table. With person-centered practice, one of the things that we learn most is in how changing our language. We knew that people working with individuals who communicated without words was oftentimes challenging if they could not understand what a brain injury might look like. So we designed a handout and we talked about it, and in the development stages, we would partner with our person-centered practice teams and say, would you review this? What is your input? And through their conversations, they said, well, we don't use the term nonverbal. And we were like, oh, we didn't want to offend anyone, but they explained that the appropriate term would be a person who communicates without words. Hence, that material was developed and it's been distributed far and wide. But again, it was listening and respecting what we were each learning about and from each other. So those conversations picked up. We moved to our person-centered practice friends, introduced us to intake and case management. The intake and case management people were those that provide direct in-home supports and services to our family members across the state. They are nurses and case managers. So we designed a webinar series for them, and ultimately the end result was that they have been able to put these, they are in transition right now of putting our trainings into their online learning management system. Again, through our person-centered practice friends, the next group, along with intake and case management, all for ECF and our choices programs, was the Clinical Consultation Network. This is a unique opportunity for us to provide training. I must say, it's almost like a radio talk show format where there's a presentation and engagement from the audience and community, but it is a tremendously diverse group of people that sign on for these calls. And we, again, developed a webinar series explicitly for them. And these trainings were also archived, recorded and archived, and are available online. Next slide, please. Thank you. The long-term supports and services continue to expand. Again, this is a relationship that started with our developmental and intellectual disabilities group, all with one, and you can see how it just kept growing. So the United Healthcare, AmeriGroup, and then Blue Care of Tennessee, again, all with the ECF and Choices programs for long-term supports and services. We have designed and developed customized trainings for each one of these. They're very similar, yet they're tweaked. We had to learn each one of their, how they provide professional development, and together came up with solutions on how we could fit our work into their training abilities. Each one of these groups has expanded. AmeriGroup has a second group, a second tier, if you will, that is called the Care Coordination College. Blue Care of Tennessee has already begun discussions with us on having our training certified through Blue Cross and Blue Shield so that it can be expanded to what is known as the full Blue Cross Blue Shield programs across the state, which again is huge. But you can't take any of building relationships for granted. people change within your system. The needs change, and listening to those needs and being able to fluctuate from filling this gap to supporting that goal, it always has to be revisited. And I have always said, signing on for when we were able to fine tune some of the work, ACL's work early on which work group we wanted to participate in, I was most excited about this one. I love them all, but this one I felt so close to, because for me, building a partnership is no different than building a relationship and ultimately a friendship. You reap what you sow. When you put the time in and people are sincere, it just works. And I will say that we as a team and as a state, we don't lose sight of who we're doing this tremendous work for. It is our brothers, sisters, mothers, aunts, uncles, friends, neighbors. It really resonates at home with us. So I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it's a nice song to sing, if you will. Next slide, please. And then there's change takes time. It is a sustainability piece. You have to be patient. It has taken several years to get to where we are. And I will say, because of COVID, a lot of things ramped itself up for training in our world, because we could do this. We were already proficient at providing these trainings at an online venue or feature, but it does take time. The best way to give yourself grace and time is to listen and learn from each other, and grow together, grow with that organization, that grow your relationship with, as I mentioned before, with the gaps, the needs, the wants. And I create wish lists, and wishes do come true. You have to work for them, but they can change. And we've noticed the brain injury community at large has grown over all these years. So it's opportunity is knocking. Education holds the key. You have to educate each other, which takes listening and learning, but you also have to make a real committed attempt at broadening that educational effort, strengthening people across our communities. Not just professionals, but you need individuals with brain injury. We need their families supported, as well as the professionals who love and care for them each day. As far as our relationship with sustaining those things that I've already mentioned across our developmental and intellectual developmental disabilities groups, is they have put motions in progress, or things are already rolling, to have this sustainable long after the grant cycle is gone. They use an online management system. It's called Relias, which provides, they can track the outcomes, they can monitor staff development. They are making this as part of required learning, which is a huge component of ongoing professional development. And the other thing is, they have a true interest in this. They truly felt there was a gap there. They asked and surveyed their providers and their professionals and their teams of, do you feel this would be useful and helpful? And without question, everybody wanted a part of it. Our training this morning had 168 people on it. And this is, as I said, this is required learning, and it's also been part of the onboarding process for new hirings and staff. So I just think it's you have to realize that it takes time with anything. All good things take time, and it's patience and understanding of getting to know each other, and then working alongside one another to make a systems change meaningful and long sustaining. So that was all I had for Tennessee. There's so much more, as you can imagine, because that was one relationship as we expanded. But if there aren't any questions, I would love to introduce. I'll wait to see if there's any questions before I.
Paula, I'm not seeing any questions at this time.
Good deal. Thank you so much, Judy. Then I would love to introduce my next door neighbor, so to speak. Scott Collins is from Kentucky, and he's going to pick up on examples of partnerships between the states.
Thanks, Paula. Once again, my name is Scott Collins. I work for the Traumatic Brain Injury Trust Fund in Kentucky. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about what it's been like to get the opportunity to partner with other states, of course, outside the Commonwealth. I know Maggie talked a little earlier about what it's like to have partners that aren't as engaged or are quiet. And I would say that is Kentucky a little bit. We have never been part of a grant or a work group before since I've been with the trust fund. So it's been really eye-opening to get the opportunity to see what other states are doing, maybe things that we're doing well, maybe things that we're not doing so well. I know that when the grant was issued to us, and it was actually written for by someone who doesn't work with our organization anymore. So after she left, we got the opportunity to take over in working with the grant. And it's just been, we have always worked so hard here in the Commonwealth looking for resources for our individuals with brain injury and looking for sources to serve them in different ways. And it's something that, as hard as we've worked in state and in the Commonwealth, we just maybe we're lacking in developing partnerships outside the state. We've been to conferences, we've been to summits, but still we weren't developing, I think, the way that we wanted to develop to be able to get ideas from other folks about what they're doing. An example, just a quick example of something that's worked for us since we've been in more than one work group, but this work group in particular, is we had a client who's moving to Tennessee. And because of the partnerships that we have here, I was quickly able to give that family a couple of names to who they could reach out to see what services were available to them in Tennessee. And that's something that in the past we would have had to work much harder to find. And I think it's been wonderful to see how we can become better. One of the things that we really are trying to work on here in the state is an updated website with an updated resource center and an updated list of what's out there in our state that can help folks, but what's also out there in other states that maybe we could become a part of and make part of our state. So within something that we've developed is a new website. We've developed a new brochure. We've developed a digital brochure. We've developed are developing that website so that we can support some support groups, or maybe make it easier for individuals with brain injuries to find ways to help them. We found a way to we're trying to include a virtual map, and that map will make it easier for folks just to click on their county and to see what's available to them in that county. And it's just been, like I said, we're not real vocal sometimes, and we've just kind of been sitting back and listening and seeing that we are lacking in some areas, but we also are seeing that there's individuals out there within these other states who are so willing to help, and they're so willing to lift you up when you don't know what the best ideas are. And it's been a wonderful opportunity for us, and hopefully something that we can continue to work in and continue to become better at, so that maybe someday we are the more engaged state, and there's another state that maybe is just like we were in the beginning. We were quiet and we were wanting to learn, and we have learned, but maybe in the future we can be at the forefront instead of kind of being someone who is just watching what everybody is doing. And it's been a really wonderful opportunity. And I would definitely, if you haven't had a chance to be a part of one of these work groups, they are so informational, and they are, you do develop friendships and you develop partners that I think that we can have in the Commonwealth, and we can use throughout, our time just to just to help us learn and help us be sometimes more creative, and just honestly being able to help those individuals with brain injuries who are seeking help and don't know where to turn. And maybe something that we've heard in a meeting will open our eyes to, hey, maybe we can do this to help that individual to be more able to get the services that they need at a point where we can't help anymore. And so it's been a wonderful opportunity, and I look forward to still being able to learn from the other states, and just being a part of something with people who do care and who do want to, who have, you know, everything that they in them is to help other individuals with brain injuries. So just again, it's been a pleasure to get to do this. And so at this point, I'm going to pass it on to Jola in Rhode Island.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Jola. I'm an African-American woman with Black long hair. And I'm here today to represent Rhode Island and talk about the relationships that we were able to build with 2 different states that had participated in the ACL TBI partnership grant. In Rhode Island, we currently have a permanent advisory commission on TBI that reports directly to the governor. At that time, we only had 1 TBI survivor and a family member of a TBI survivor. And you know, with obtaining the ACL TBI partnership grant, one of the goals was to increase TBI survivor membership. And one of the goals, or one of the ways that we were able to accomplish this goal, was by working with Massachusetts and being able to learn about how to properly conduct an advisory board. Just to step back a couple of steps back, is our commission was kind of done ad hoc, where we would be able to meet whenever people were available. So that was one thing we wanted to make sure, for sustainability purposes, that we were meeting regularly, and have the members really understand what it meant and how important it was to increase the membership of TBI survivors. So we had Massachusetts come and speak with our commission, which they were really enthused, and we ended up updating our regulations that included that we would be increasing our TBI survivor, the members of that were TBI survivors. And it's been, they have been a tremendous asset to be able to utilize our mentors, whether it be from Massachusetts or Tennessee. We have a TBI registry that has not been functional for a couple of years due to our inability to be able to kind of transfer the ICD-9 CM codes to the ICD-10 CM codes. And we were able to utilize our partnership with Tennessee, who assisted us with getting all of the ICD-10 CM codes for TBIs, and then kind of walk us through how they were able to use their TBI registry to provide resources to the state. And that was, you know, and I think that piece was really important to our Brain Injury Association, was how do we utilize this data that we have to provide resources to TBI survivors while they're going through this transition after, you know, possibly leaving the hospital or obtaining their TBI. Those were the 2 states that we've been able to regularly with, but we're looking forward to partnering with other states as we dive into the relationship between TBI and the juvenile justice system, and TBI and domestic violence. One second, I would like to pass it over to. Sorry, guys.
Are you passing it to me, Jola?
Yes, I am, Dana.
And we
Passing
got
it to you.
to go to break here. All right. Give me one moment, folks. My computer's being wonky.
Actually, Dana, first Q&A, any Q&A.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Q&A. Why don't we take a look at what's going on in the chat here? There's been some activity. Let's see. We have Alicia says that Oklahoma has a bill, HB 1010, to create a TBI advisory council pass the House. That's amazing. We have any Q&A for this this group here? All right. Well, looks like we are gonna go to break. Give me one moment before we do. First, I did want to introduce myself. I sort of popped onto your screens there, realized I hadn't introduced myself yet. I am a Caucasian young woman with brown hair. And I'm wearing my University of Illinois hoodie, not only because I'm so excited that we're the #1 seed, woo, but also because I have a bit of a cold, so bear with me as I take over the mic here for a little bit. As I said, I think we're about to go to break here, but I did want to go over a few of the other things in this chat before we do. There's one announcement that I put in there that, during today's and throughout this whole month, you're going to learn about a variety of products, both through the work groups and through individual states. Many of these work groups and other products are soon to be out on our future websites. Unfortunately, we are moving a little bit at government speed here, so with the soon to be website. So if you do want to hear more about when that website, about that website when it does launch, I just wanted to put out a quick plug for the TBI TARC Facebook page, because that notification about the website whenever we get it moving here will certainly be announced on that Facebook page. Okay, so now we're going to go to break. There will be some sweet tunes on during the break. I think we fixed the volume issue from last week. Thank you, Connor. And I'm quite proud of this playlist I put together, so I hope y'all enjoy. We are going to come back at about 2:30 or thereabouts, when the music stops. All right, well, folks, this is Dana again. I know someone in the chat had to leave the webinar during the break, so I just want to kind of let people filter in if it takes an extra minute for to get back on the webinar here. I did listen to Tim McCool jams. I'd love it if you want to get off. If you just need the quiet for now, I will not be offended, I promise. Sorry about the song repeats in there. We will have new songs at all future webinars, my guarantee. Give one more minute, I guess. I don't know about y'all. I think this is just such a fabulous webinar. I think it was it Paula earlier was saying that maybe folks don't expect the Sustainable Partnership Work Group to be the most exciting. I'll be honest, I was one of those people, and this webinar is quickly changing my mind. So can we go to the next slide here? This is a slide with, oh, I was going to talk about the slide. Sorry, if you can go back one, the future webinars here. This is just a slide of all the future webinars. You do have to sign up to each one of them individually. I know there are a few folks that had some difficulty getting onto this one because they used their old link. It will be a new link that you'll get for each one of the sessions that you sign up for. Next one coming up, March 23rd, is Return to Learn, Equal Access to Brain Injury for Students with Brain Injury. Oh, sorry, equal access to brain education for students with brain injury. Sorry about that. On March 30th, Justice for All, Serving Individuals with Brain Injury Across the Justice System. And Advocacy will be maximizing the effectiveness of advisory boards through full participation. So we really, really hope you guys sign up for those and look forward to seeing you next week if you do. I think the next thing I'm supposed to do here is introduce Dave. I think that's my to-do list here. Dave Boyer is going to be our next speaker here as a part of our piece for partnerships with federal entities, which is the next segment of this webinar that we're moving into now. And he's going to kick us off real quick. And I won't read his whole bio. They are as a part of the slides there at the end. But he is with NDRN, the National Disability Rights Network, and he provides training, technical assistance in the area of abuse and neglect in community settings, access authority, housing, monitoring and investigations, association standing, veteran issues, and traumatic brain injuries. He also provides assistance to the networks related to the protection and advocacy system for traumatic brain injuries, which if you were in our last webinar, you heard Rima speak about the PAPI program. We're so excited to have both of those programs under the umbrella here at ACL. And now I will turn things over to Dave.
All right. Thank you, Dana.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I have to first say, though, I've been instructed to let you know this is not Geraldo. This is not Geraldo Rivera shirt.
This is not me. This is a very handsome Geraldo Rivera. I am on the right, and I am a Caucasian male with ever increasingly less hair over the years and ever increasingly more gray hair. Geraldo's on the slide because I can't really talk about the protection and advocacy system without talking about Geraldo. He was the played a key role in the creation of the system. In 1972, Geraldo held a series of investigative reports on ABC, on their local affiliate, that highlighted the abuses, the tremendous abuses at Willowbrook, a state institution in New York that housed people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Geraldo's series then prompted Congress to take action, and one of the actions that they did was create the protection and advocacy system. That system was established by Congress in 1975, and what the original statute, the protection and advocacy for persons with developmental disabilities, that statute required each state to establish an agency, whether it be a state-run agency or a private nonprofit agency, that would remain independent of the state, independent of providers, and provide protections for people with developmental disabilities. If you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so again, that first federal statute that provided our authority was the Developmental Disabilities Assistance. We also, over the years, have received more and more federal mandates with more and more federal statutes. At this point, we're looking at just about every disability group in every setting. So you can see that we have protection and advocacy for mentally ill, individuals. But really key to this talk is in 2001 was the Protection and Advocacy for Individuals with Traumatic Brain Injury, or the Tbi program. And that's the program that provides services for people with traumatic brain injuries in a variety of settings. Our most recent statute was in 2018. That was the Protection and Advocacy for Representative Pay Review. So anybody who receives representative payees in the Social Security system can receive services under that. Next slide. Next slide, please. Each of those federal statutes provides essentially almost the same federal mandate, and that's to pursue legal, administrative, and other appropriate remedies. So what that means is that we can provide as a P&A network, and there's in our network, we have one in each state and territory, so a total of 57. There's one in every state, each of the territories. Washington, D.C. has a protection advocacy, and the Native American individuals have a protection advocacy. Each one of those is independent of each other. It's independent of its state, and it provides a range of administrative, legal, and other remedies for people with disabilities. The range of issues is almost unlimited. P&As deal with housing issues, they deal with education issues, they deal with abuse and neglect, they deal with transportation, many, many issues. All of these really with the key mandate to make sure that people with disabilities are cared for and live in the least restrictive setting and are in the community with full integration. Next slide will show some of the ranges of remedies that our protection advocacies provide. There we go. So as you can see, P&As provide a range of remedies. We provide all of these services to people with disabilities free of charge. And what a P&A can do ranges wildly from just information referrals, where we maybe get on the telephone with somebody or at an outreach event and just provide them a little bit of information or a referral to one of our partners. We provide training. We provide negotiation, administrative actions, all the way to monitoring, class actions, and legislative advocacy. So you can see it ranges, what we might provide to an individual with a disability ranges from just, giving them a little bit of information all the way to, going to court or going to the legislature for that remedy. Next slide. So before I get to this slide, I'm going to kind of talk about one of the most powerful things that the protection advocacies have. Again, like I said, the federal mandate extends to anybody with a disability anywhere that they live or receive services. And one of the most powerful things that a P&A is afforded is the ability to request records, to meet with individuals with disabilities, or visit the place where they're receiving services. So in the case of an abuse and neglect allegation, or if we feel there is warranted probable cause that abuse or neglect occurs, we can go into any facility, into any school, and conduct an investigation. We also, one of the very important things that we do is monitor these facilities to make sure that people with disabilities are receiving adequate treatment, and they receive information on their rights and are able to pursue remedies on that. So, so the protection advocacy in general has, quite a bit of authority and quite a bit of latitude in how we treat people with disabilities, how we provide services to them, and I just kind of want to talk about then the most relevant protection advocacy for individuals with traumatic brain injury, our Tbi program. This is our Tbi program by the numbers. Tbi is one of our smaller P&A statutes, much smaller than our developmental disability or mental illness statutes, but it's still an important statute. As you can see, information referrals, 7,200 people. So average in a year, we'll talk to about 7,200 people on the phone or outreach events and provide them some information. We conduct many training activities, almost 1,500 training activities, and many materials are disseminated, such as reports and information sheets, things of that nature that we might provide at an outreach event. Individually, much smaller. So again, we provide a lot of information to a lot of people. We may take fewer cases, and in an average year around the country, we average about 1,000 individual cases, resulting in 138 policy changes. So those policies could range from, we go into meet with somebody in a facility and, there's some policy that is violating that person's rights. We can change that policy all the way to policies at a state level or even federal level that impact folks. And again, we also are involved in class action and non-class action lawsuits. In an average year, around 20 cases involving people with traumatic brain injury around the country. Next slide. Here in this very busy slide are kind of the problem areas, kind of the services that we provide in the areas of traumatic brain injury. And you can see quite a bit of abuse and neglect, a lot of housing assistance. We don't provide direct housing assistance, but we do assist individuals in obtaining adequate funding for housing, policies, and we do engage in some litigation around the Fair Housing Act. 25% of our traumatic brain injury money is involved in healthcare, primarily around TBI waivers or other health and community-based services waivers. Okay, next slide. This is our, how effective is the Tbi program? So I have to include this slide. The giant, I'm sorry, this is the intervention strategy. This is the services that we provide to people with disabilities. And again, I told you it ranges from very low levels of services all the way through to litigation and class action. You can see that those litigation and class action are a very small amount, about 4% of what we do. Most of what we do is the short-term assistance piece, the 70%. And that's just really meeting with an individual client one-on-one, reviewing their rights with them and deciding if we can assist them. There may be some things that we can do in their facility, working with their facility to make their lives more manageable. It may be a case where we can find some type of services for them to live more effectively in the community, those type of things. So most of what we do under the Tbi program would be that short-term assistance. Next slide. And here's the reason for closing cases. And again, very busy, but the most important thing is to see that almost all issues are resolved in the client's favor, 48%, or somewhat in the client's favor, 23%. Only about 4% are not resolved in the client's favor. So very effective system. We tend to, again, we try to resolve cases at the lowest level possible. We try to work with the facilities. We try to work with the individuals so that we can, resolve it most effectively. Okay, next slide. How can we get in touch with our P&A? After all that success, I'm sure that you would want to work with your P&A. And P&As, by and large, almost all of them are nonprofit organizations. So they definitely have an interest in working with other organizations. The limited funding that's provided to nonprofits and other organizations makes it, very effective to kind of group together and work together and PNAs are no exception. They work with a variety of organizations around the country, NASHA and BIAA. In a minute, you're going to hear about how a PNA works with their state ombudsman. So PNAs are always looking to work with other organizations. The easiest way is just to get in touch with your state or territory PNA. There's a list on our website, the NDRN website, ndrn.org. There's a list of PNAs. It's really the most effective way is to contact that PNA, ask to speak with their protection advocacy for traumatic brain injury staff person. It's usually 1 or 2 staff members that work in that area. And most PNAs are very willing to work with other organizations. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is my contact information. If you do have any questions, obviously we'll be answering a couple of those later on, but this is my contact information, david.boyer@ndrn.org, in case something comes up after the session and you have more questions that you don't get answered today. That's my contact information.
So Dave, you do have a couple of questions coming in the chat. If you could take 1 more minute.
Okay, sure.
And then
thing.
I am going to make a slight adjustment to the agenda for folks. In respective time of some of our panelists, we're going to switch Tanisha with Joseph. So get to these questions over to Dave real quick, and then we'll go straight into Joseph Lugo.
Okay.
And the questions for you, Dave, one is, do PNAs develop state plans? If yes, how can brain injury leads partner in the development of that plan?
Okay. No, PNAs don't develop state plans. They're independent of the state government and they're independent of all of that. Typically, well, not typically, but often the PNA will be on the committee that develops that state plan. Yeah, but they don't actually develop the state plan. They'll advocate for more effective state plans. They'll make sure that people are aware of their state plans, but no, not directly. Maybe just on a committee.
And then you have another question in here that says, so technically, if a person doesn't provide all the things that a TBI person needs, would this be able to help make them?
Yeah. I wish that were the case. Unfortunately, that's not. PNAs are funded to provide advocacy, so they aren't funded to provide direct services. So we don't provide financial support or direct housing support for folks with disabilities. What a PNA could do is make a person aware of what resources might be out there. They might be able to provide a referral to another organization that provides direct services, or if there are services available that they are eligible for and are not receiving, then the PNA will step in and advocate for them to get those services.
Excellent. And one more question for you real quick. Do they develop priorities that brain injury can be incorporated into?
I'm assuming.
And that's related, I guess, to the state plans, previous question.
Okay. I will say that a PNA does develop priorities at an institutional level in its own. We develop our own priorities, and those are based on input from the disability community. But those would be, just kind of what the PNA focuses on. And every PNA has its own priorities every year, and how many of them relate to brain injury vary based on the amount of input that they receive from the community. They don't directly affect kind of the state priorities of brain injury, but again, we advocate, we work with the legislatures, and we're often on the committees that determine that stuff. So not
Wonderful.
directly.
Thank you so much, Dave. We really appreciate it. And if anyone has more questions for him, they can follow up with his contact information there. I know that's fabulous. And I don't want to take any more of Joseph's time that we've already taken, so I will not belabor your bio. You've done so many things, but most importantly right now is he's with the Center for Innovation and Partnership at ACL. The folks here who run the TBI program as well or at ACL to link that back together. And he's currently serving as the director for the Office of Network Advancement. And I will turn it on over to Joseph.
Thank you so much, Dana. And thank you for your playlist. I hopefully you can share that. Share that with. So we're very fortunate. We're going to have an example from Massachusetts, a real life example of some of the collaboration between a TBI program and the ADRC work. But I just wanted to kind of help provide some context in terms of one of the programs that are part of the ACL umbrella, and that's the ADRC No Wrong Door, or Aging and Disability Resource Center initiative. And so just on this first slide here, I just wanted to start with a quote. One of my favorite writers is C.S. Lewis, and he said that when a ship is at high seas, especially when it's turbulent and tough waters, there's three questions that need to be answered. The first question is, how do we keep from sinking? The second question is, how do we not hit any other ships? And then the third question, and maybe the most important, is why are we even out here in the first place? And so I wanted to look at that last question, because if we go to the next slide, one of the questions that I think sometimes you can be asked is related to, does having a coordinated access system, does it really matter, like a no wrong door system? Does it matter to have a culturally competent workforce that can recognize maybe some of their own biases that they have, maybe recognize the power imbalance sometimes that can occur when you're interviewing somebody? Does it really matter? Well, CMS looked at this question, and they looked across 16 states over a 5-year period. And they asked, does it make a difference if you go through the wrong door? What if you start your journey in long-term services supports in an institution and not in the community? And what they found was quite startling, whether it was older adults, individuals with physical disabilities, or the IDD community. What they found was there was a stark difference. If an individual, we'll do older adults because it's probably the most contrast. If an older adult starts their journey of LTSS in an institution, 3 out of 4 of those individuals will likely have a long-term stay. That means 90 days or longer. If an older adult starts their journey in the community, 4 out of 100 individuals will have a long-term stay. So it really is quite a shocking difference. So it's more than just inconvenience. It's more than just having to call 8 or 9 different places to get the right answer, which is frustrating enough for families and caregivers. But there is a efficiency and a fiscal impact, and it really can disrupt a lot of family dynamics by going through the wrong door. Real quickly, in the next slide, talks about the evolution of this vision of streamlined access. And so some of the takeaways was I'd share. One, this idea didn't start in DC. This started in the States. This was Oregon, Washington, Wisconsin were some of the leaders in this area of saying we really want individuals to start their journey in the community, not an institution. But as you're thinking about partnerships, you have to keep in mind that when we have provided funding to states, we really have given states the autonomy to kind of interpret that vision based on their strengths of their state or their community, because many times this is local. And so many times it's interpreted in different ways. And so for some communities, you'll see the ADRC is interpreted as a program with an organization. So maybe it's a 1-800 number, maybe it's a database, maybe it's INR staff or working with 211. Other states, more communities are saying, no, this is much larger. This is our organization. We're defined. We identify as an ADRC, and we need to partner with other ADRCs. And so it's actually a physical organization. And then finally, where it's now, we're seeing the most traction is that it's really a comprehensive system that's designed for all populations and all payers. And so then the next slide tries to emphasize that. When you think about partnering, try to think of it at multiple layers. It's not just is my organization in a database? Or am I on the governance leadership board, which those are very important. But there are multiple ways to partner, whether it's a state leadership, whether it's actually maybe an MOU with the community-based organization. Maybe it's training that's going on for the access workforce. Maybe it's part of the technology platform that the state has. So it's just a lot of different ways of how you could leverage what we're showing as an infrastructure of a state. Another thing just to stress is that this funding and this vision is not designed to create a new network or new organizations. I mean, in fact, we actually have language that tries to emphasize that point. This is trying to coordinate the existing organizations, the existing workforce that you would have in a state. And so I just wanted to emphasize that point. And then finally, if we go to the last slide, I wanted to show one of the questions, well, how do I get connected, or where do I know where my state kind of ranks in terms of this access system? So you could actually, if you're a caregiver or your organization that just wants to see how mature your system it might be, in every state, we actually have an active ADRC No Wrong Door grant. So we can connect you with that individual if you'd like, but you can also see the score of your state. There's an assessment that's done every 3 years, ARP Foundation, Commonwealth Fund, SCAN Foundation. They actually have multiple measures that they use to assess states. And one of the indicators they feel of a high performing state is having a mature access system. So you can actually go to this website, the LTSS scorecard. You can look up your state and then kind of see where do we rank in the process. And so I wanted to share that resource with you as well. And then finally, there are some resources that we included in the kind of slide deck. And these are some tools that we've developed recently with a Center for Excellence out of Missouri. And so these are trying to really help the maybe traditional aging workforce or workforce and disability community, but really help on the life course concept and some of the principles. And so we've developed some tools about integrating Support Star, the trajectory tool. I mean, these are really tangible tip sheets that we're seeing that very popular among right now in terms of our organizations of how can I improve that exchange when I'm working with an individual or a family. So I'm maybe not bringing some of those biases to that conversation, and really kind of looking at the goals and dreams of the individual and not some of the pressures maybe I'd be getting as an organization. So anyway, we wanted to provide some of those tools with you. They're fairly recent, but we think we're super excited and really indebted to the USAID there in Missouri who's helped us. So that's a little bit of background of the national initiative, and you're gonna get to hear in a little bit. I don't know if we're gonna go directly to Massachusetts or if we're gonna go somewhere else. We have Gabriella Lawrence Soto from Massachusetts. Are we gonna go to her, Dana, or are we gonna go to somewhere else?
Come back to Kenesha, would that be possible? And I'm so sorry that Joseph can't stay to answer live questions. We're running a little behind time here, but if you want to put your questions for him in the chat, we will get you those answers for sure. And Terry has also put the links to all of those fabulous resources that we didn't get to go into depth on, but you can take a look at them yourselves. So we're going to Gabby now, or are we going? I'm sorry. I think we're going to Gabby now.
We're gonna go to Kenesha. I was gonna just let her finish and then.
Oh, okay. Okay, let's go to Kenesha and then to Gabby. I'm so sorry, y'all. I'm stepping in for Tom here.
That's okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kenesha Tate, I am the Traumatic Brain Injury Program Grant Manager for the Brain and Spinal Injury Trust Fund Commission here in Georgia. I am an African-American female with light brown and dark brown braids. Today, I am going to discuss our partnership with the Protection and Advocacy Agency, as well as our ombudsperson. Next slide, please. So the Brain and Spinal Injury Trust Fund Commission, we partner frequently with agencies throughout the state of Georgia. Our P&A and ombudsperson agencies, we actually have representatives on our advisory committee from those two agencies. They participate very regularly During those meetings, they are able to give us insight and information about what's going on. We do provide a time during the meeting for everyone to give updates. This partnership has worked very well with both agencies. Our protection and advocacy representative has participated and continues to participate on our Children and Youth Committee. Again, he always shares information with us. He's able to provide resources for individuals with TBIs. He's also able to provide resources to the other agencies that are on our advisory committee, as well as our Children and Youth Committee. One of the greatest things that just happened recently, he actually volunteered to be on our state plan subcommittee. And through that, we were able to develop objectives and measurements in the state plan, as well as he will continue to work with us as we implement the state plan. He's one of the champions for a few of our measurements. So that has worked really well. We actually, my first year of being with the Trust Fund Commission, his name is Joe Sara. He and I actually sat on a panel discussion during my first ACL Awareness Day. And so this partnership is sustained through information sharing, being a resource for one another. I know anything that I need, I can always pick up the phone and call and ask him if he needs anything. The same is here with me. And so that is one of our best and most sustainable partnerships. And now, if you have any questions. If not, I will turn it over to Gabby.
Thank you, Kanisha.
No problem.
All right, so today I'm going to talk about what we are up to in Massachusetts. And I want to start off with just saying the ADRCs are among one of my favorite partnerships that we have, because it's so far reaching in terms of their partnerships, and it has definitely given us an opportunity to not only like get in the door with new partners, but to really set roots and like practice having our staff look at resource facilitation in a way that it's outside of the agency. Like, we can't do this work alone. You know, we can't do it just within our departments. We gotta be far reaching. We gotta work collaboratively, and the ADRCs are just a really good example of how they are just actively looking for new resources to have available to the consumers that they serve. So how did ours come to be? I started working at MRC back in 2014, and like Scott, I inherited a grant proposal where the staff that wrote it retired at that time. And by the way, my name is Gabriella. I just remembered that I did not introduce myself. I am the Learning and Development Coordinator at the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission. I am Latina. I am of brown skin and short brown hair, and I wear glasses. So I inherited this grant back in 2014. And really the goal for the team that was left was to build this partnership. Build it because it was based on individual relationships. So we had to really think about, all right, if we're going to do the systems change grant, who are we going to partner with? How are we going to do it? And we really focused on learning a lot about each other. What did each other have? Focused a lot on demystifying a lot of preconceived notions about what we do, you know, case management in the ADRC world, in the Aging and Disability Resource Consortium can look a certain way within the aging agencies. It looks different in independent living center settings, and it looks different at MRC. So just like exchanging our glossary of acronyms and like what does what mean for each other was really important, so that we could get to the bigger bits, which was what are our priorities? You know, who do we serve? What do we have in common? If you could turn to the next slide, please. And a big part of that was driven by our leadership. our leadership invested a lot of time and energy in sitting down one-to-one with the ADRCs within our agency that were part of the grant project. So we started off with the project first, looking at 3 regions in the Northeast, where we found that there was a lot of incidences of brain injuries in the aging community. But then thinking about, well, let's not just focus on the aging population. We need to be looking at the age spectrum. You know, we have individuals in the brain injury community who typically get injured early on, but then we hold on to them, you know, in our agency, because once you're a consumer of the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission, you tend to be a consumer for life, right? So instead of thinking that we can't hand them over to another agency, it's more like, let's collaborate together. Now, what are the changing needs of this individual? How can we work together to continue to serve this individual? And so also looking at how people, individuals with disabilities, move from community settings to facilities, right? And there's a lot of commonality in terms of how we do our outreach, how we are trying to always connect people to services and information. So in doing that, we found that MRC being the lead state agency in brain injury, it gave us an opportunity to offer awareness to the ADRC about what are brain injuries, you know, what does that look like? What can you do better to serve individuals with brain injuries? And in return, they taught us what are the needs of individuals who are aging and how those needs change over time, and what partnerships can we leverage at the regional and local levels, and then making those connections with MRC and where MRC staff were located, and saying, hey, let's have representation. Let's have a MRC staff member be represented in your regional ADRC meetings, and vice versa. Having ADRC staff come to MRC and train our staff on the various services. So that was done for a lot of years, training ADRC staff on how to screen for brain injuries and what does that mean. And on the reverse, helping our staff understand how to navigate aging services and waivers on that end. We've been able to spend a lot of time investing in increasing that awareness so that we can make better connections for people. We've invested a lot of energy in trainings to upskill staff to be able to, you know, coordinate services for individuals. We've been able to meet those complex needs for the residents of Massachusetts by both holding that no wrong door, right? Call MRC, call the Brain Injury Association, or call the ADRC. You should be able to get connected with whatever you need. And really practicing that has helped us also hold the philosophy of nothing for us without us, right? So at MRC, we've been able to develop a new department called MRC Connect, where basically instead of having 17 ways in which you can get into MRC services, we've established one door, right? And that one door connects to the other door over at the ADRC. So that way it just helps streamline getting people into services faster. It helps with the coordination. Instead of having consumers apply for the various 17 programs at our agency, they're only doing it once. So it's more efficient. And also it just gives us a better sense of what they need. So here is an example of what it looks like now, where we've been able to leverage Mass Options, which is overseen by the Executive Office of Elder Affairs. It's a resource facilitation center where they look at all of the services across the state, and they keep track of what services are available, eligibility determination. They do warm handoffs, and underneath them, they work very closely with the ADRCs, and especially the options counselor position has been one position that we've leveraged a lot at MRC because these counselors are able to navigate spaces where may be limiting for us. So they may be able to see a consumer first because they've gone to the hospital, right? And while they're talking to that individual as they're thinking about transitioning out of that hospital, you have a brain injury, so we should get you connected to the Mass Rehab Commission. So it's just been helpful to understand what the Aging and Disability Resource Consortiums have to offer. Who are those key staff members that we could basically build off of? And then on the reverse side, on the MRC side, we have access to this pilot that we're running right now, the New Start Brain Injury program, where in our current grant, we're looking at providing short-term case management for individuals that have substance use disorders co-occurring with the brain injury, right? And then so getting a sense of who are those individuals, how could we quickly connect them to short-term case management so that they don't fall through the cracks, right? While they may be waiting for long-term services and supports to get set up by our own agency and by other programs in the community. And then at the same time, also building in opportunities for the Brain Injury Association of Massachusetts to come in and say, hey, we have family support. We have supports for individuals. Do you want to join the work groups? Do you want to participate in other educational opportunities, whether it's education for the family or it's education for the workforce? So it's been really great to be a part of high level leadership meetings where these conversations are happening all the way down to the local level, where regional meetings, there's representation there, where brain injury is always being talked about. Consumer voices are always being talked about and figuring out how can we do it better. And one of the ways that MRC has elevated the consumer voice is by developing a new department called the Office of Individual and Family Engagement, which has given us an opportunity to really focus on how can we elevate consumer voices within our own agency, as we've seen other agencies do that across the state. So in summary, I just want to share that, it takes a lot of work. I would say stay committed. Do not build your partnerships based on one person. Think about the system. Where are the pieces within the system which you can build longevity, whether it's through ongoing, refreshing training, building it into your onboarding. Those that are going to be exiting the positions that they handed off to somebody else, to just always have someone that maintains these relationships, because they have to be maintained. Look for new ways to work together. We've leveraged our partnership with the Aging and Disability Consortia to help us build our new referral program called MRC Connect, because they have had so much experience with that. And we've also been able to leverage them to represent us at our state Brain Injury Commission. They've been a part of sharing with us resources that they from their funding sources, but we've also partnered up with them in this grant cycle, just like we did the previous cycle. And we plan to continue to partner up with them with future grant cycles, because again, the needs of individuals with disabilities is going to be changing. And so we want to stay working together and figuring out how can we do it better. And so that's all I have to share for now. Thank you. So now I'm going to turn it over back to Dana.
That's right. I am here. I just want to thank you to Dave and Kanisha and to Gabby. You guys just really reflected such a great translation of the federal picture down to the local, which is something that is very challenging to do when you look at some of our complex federal government systems there. So I think we're gonna go, let me first see if there's any questions that came in for that group. I think Dave answered his. All right, no questions coming in now. Folks can put questions into the chat at any time, and we will try to get to it. So Now we're going to hopefully engage the chat box a little bit more here. We're going to be doing a facilitated discussion on a number of the themes that you've heard here, obviously around sustaining partnerships and the federal and state connection there and partnerships, but that way as well as at your states and at your local levels there. So if I don't see any questions, so I'm going to start us off. And the first question that we've got here are, what are some of the ways that state programs can sustain partnerships after the funding source or grant has ended? Not seeing any action in the chat box. If you're having difficulty locating your chat box, it's just you may have to press the chat button at the bottom there, and it'll bring up the panel for it, depending on if what view you're in there. Okay, let me maybe just move on to the next question, and folks can be thinking about both of them. How do we move these partnerships forward? State organizations, individuals. Oh, we've got a couple of answers to this question here. Gabby's saying, look at each other's state plans and agency plans. Absolutely. That you've heard even from the Pnas here that even if they don't have their own state plan, that there's some ways you can collaborate around managing each other's state plans and things like that. And same across the agency level. And then we've got someone coming in here, and yeah, I don't know, as everyone who wants to answer, maybe we can panelists, not the whole crew here, but the panelists, maybe we can do that. And then if the panelists want to, say a little bit more than what I'm able to convene from the chat, that would be awesome. And
yeah, this is Gabby. I was just suggesting that, you look at each other's state plans and your agency plans. Those are usually posted. So if you're interested in partnering up with someone new, check them out, read up on them and see what is a priority for them, and see if maybe that's in alignment with what you're trying to do. And the timing sometimes is right, sometimes that may require you tapping into another partner that can do a warm transition or a handoff into creating that new partnership.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabby. You explained that so much better than I ever could. A little message in a chat there. We've got another comment in here that says, I like that the information is, what is going on here, is not just housed with one employee. Absolutely. That's another great piece to the ART way of thinking. It, as Gabby demonstrated, that thinking really trickled down from the ADRC partnership down to the level that she was working at with the TBI program as well. So it's a way of thinking even more than it is a place.
Dana, could I comment on the?
Please, Dave. Yeah, sorry, I saw you coming on right when I was transitioning there. If you want to hop back to the previous question.
I was just going to say that, every P&A has its own priority setting process every year. So, the more they hear from people with, that work in the area of TBI or individuals with TBI, the more that they can focus on that issue. So they usually do a survey at one point during the year, and it's important to let them know that, that there are concerns out there.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. That's such an important point there. We've got Lois in the chat is saying contact a CIL, and that's a Center for Independent Living. And she further says sometimes CILs have outside resources and funding. Yes, not only do CILs CILs have outside resources, and again, that's the Centers for Independent Living. Those are the programs that are housed under, housed under ACL as well. So they're a partner that we can work with that, you know, in non-COVID times, they sit right across the aisle from me there. So we definitely have great relationships there, and we would love to see that further engagement at the local level there to the CILs. Is there anyone on any of the panelists that have a good collaboration with their Center for Independent Living, or want to talk about the Center for Independent Living? Oh, I got a note here that says sometimes I'm cutting out, so I'm gonna turn my video off because I don't know why, but for some reason that helps when I turn the video off, that it doesn't cut quite as well. So let me back up because I'm not sure what folks heard me say. We were talking about contacting a Center for Independent Living, which is a suggestion that was put into the chat here, and CILs run under the ACL umbrella of organizations as well. I was saying that during non-COVID times, the folks who work on those programs work right across my desk from me. So it really is a relationship that we're able to maintain really nicely in-house. Makes it even easier to do that, and we would love to see that at the state level as well. I don't know if there's anyone on any of the panelists who have maintained have started a relationship with their CILs, or want to talk about the process of trying to do so at all. Give a minute if anyone wants to talk about that or weigh into that into the chat as well. Hello, Paula.
Hi, everyone. We have the Tennessee Disability Coalition formed a cooperative wherein the coalition owns a building. We call it the Nest, and people, other disability organizations and agencies share space with us. That has truly laid the physical foundation for us to be able to walk down the hall and ask a question of our CILs, and to really build relationships. As we've all talked about, you know, it takes time to develop relationships. It takes time to tap into a system, if you will, which again takes time to develop. But with our CILs, it has just been you just have to really figure out the best way to support each other's goals. And that always starts with conversations. But I think having easy access and engagement with your CILs is vitally important. And sometimes you can't wait for that relationship to start. You have to jumpstart it in many instances, based on just having a situation come to the table and you need to consult with them on, or they need to consult with you, because we are the brain injury experts, and we can answer a lot of questions and help guide them. Just one of the things I found over time, I had done a presentation for our building a few years ago, and when a meeting was taking place between a Center of Independent Living consultant and an individual with a brain injury, when I talked about how they engage, did they consider having 2 appointments a day apart? Could they support this person with transportation? Could they have a shortened meeting, or just have a break between a meeting? And it was very enlightening, because they never thought, you know, most people sit down to a meeting for a half an hour to an hour, and they don't give any thoughts to how long it might take for your guest to process what it is you're saying. So utilizing tools and resources to have a meaningful engagement really was very helpful for them to realize it's not just paper and pencil. How can that individual support and get all that they need to out of that meeting time together? But having, for me, having the Centers of Independent Living right within arm's reach, literally, has been a very positive, rewarding experience. We need to do better with it, as with every relationship, but it's that set the really good foundation for us.
That's a fabulous example, Paula. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Welcome.
You know, it's kind of funny. I know these are long days here, so it's almost like, can we remember what we talked about in the first few sessions? I am gonna, oh, got something else coming into the chat here. I wanna make sure that we get to all of the panelist questions before we get to mine, or sorry, all of the audience questions before we get to mine, because I can talk to these folks whenever I want. And that's not an option for everyone on this webinar. So this piece in the chat here is, says many Florida P&A staff participate and sit on coalitions where there are many members from the SILs. I think it would be good for us, I'm a Florida P&A staff person, to look what PATB and brain injury awareness and mutual work can. Sorry, I've been told I'm cutting out again here. I'm just going to keep my video off for the remainder of this time. Sorry about that, folks. Let me just go back up and read this piece in the chat again so that everyone can hear me. Many Florida P&A staff participate and sit on coalitions where there are many members from the SILs. I think it would be good for us, I'm a Florida P&A staff person, to look at what PATB and brain injury awareness and mutual work can be done. Where did that go? And mutual work can be done in that arena. And that is a very good point. And it's something, you know, we at the federal level, we take practices that we're seeing at the state levels, like the P&As and the SILs sitting next to each other. And then we bring in TBI to that conversation as well. And so we're seeing what you guys are doing on the state level, and we are trying to mirror that at the federal level as well. So I'm happy to see that that is a relationship that's going both ways. I do want to see if we could take us back to the very beginning of the session when we were talking about the products that we had. I don't know, maybe somebody who did, maybe Maggie or someone who did that conversation on the products could just do like a 30-second refresher or something. Just reminding folks in the audience what those products were before we talk about them.
If Maggie's not, I don't know if Maggie's here, but this is Gabby. So the two products that we created, one of them was the stories. So it's a template for you all to use to highlight some of the stories, to highlight your relationships with some of your partners in a form of a story that you could disseminate out, whether it's on your newsletter or whatever other platform you use. But so there's the story, and then there's the tip sheet. That one was just lessons learned from within the group on just ways in which we've been able to successfully either start or maintain our relationships with partners. And it was intended for other state grantees to use as they're thinking about their future in creating new relationships and sustaining existing relationships created this cycle, as well as any non-grantee, you know, as you're doing your own work and you're trying to reach out and do good by your consumers, you know, think about who else can you partner up with, and just give you a lot of examples on how to best do that, some best practices on how to do it.
Thank you so much, Gabby. And Terry has just put the links to both of those products into the chat. So it would be really awesome if folks could open those up. I do the group. I want to take the time that we have now for this work group to get some really good feedback from the audience on what they like about the products, what they don't like about the products, what else they would like to see sort of in that same vein. So it'd be awesome if folks could open up both of those pieces right now. Give just a second to do that. Okay, so looking at the tip sheet, is there a good example from that tip sheet that anyone notices that something that was identified in the tip sheet that was covered today? Minute for people to go into the chat. And the panelists, I know you guys are the experts, so I imagine you see many of those examples reflected in the conversation today. If any of you guys want to poke on any that were right at the top of your mind there.
Hi, this is Ashley with the Tennessee Department of Health. I kind of just wanted to piggyback on what Gabby was saying. I think it's really important to seek out those new partners. But if you're kind of like me, you might be a little shy, especially reaching out to people that you might not already know. And so I think that's a great opportunity to work with those partners that you already have, and they may know individuals within those organizations that you're looking out to reach to, and they can kind of make that connection. So I think it's really important to seek out new partners that way as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. Got some good content coming in the chat now from Terry. Says that keeping your partners engaged is extremely important. Absolutely. It's not just, oh, my internet is unstable again. Sorry, folks. I moved to a different part of the room and I think I'm still cutting out here a little bit. Go back and reach into the chat here where Terry's talking about how keeping your partners engaged is extremely important. Absolutely. It's not just, engaging them when, when you need something from them or something like that. You have to be offering them something as well. And she says, we include them in our, sorry, hang on. We include them in our quarterly meetings. I'm so sorry, folks. I don't know what's going on with my computer today. And then somebody wrote in the chat, very important, Ashley, thank you. So thank you for coming back on and sharing that piece there, Ashley. And then Terry to the previous says that they've remained engaged. So that's been a helpful, one of the promising practices that they're seeing over there.
Dana, this is Paula again from Tennessee.
Hi, Paula.
I don't mean to be a broken record, but I often think that sometimes we get caught up in the fact of this big partnership, that the word partnership has different meanings for different people, which is why I lean heavily on building a relationship. And I think that it softens the playing field. Sometimes with partnerships, people are expecting that they have to have an action item and agenda. And with systems change, it's learning and exploring. And as Ashley had said, and my other colleagues have said, is that you look at each other's system and find a way to come together to the table. But I remember asking one of our friends in Tennessee, I don't know what made me ask, but I think it may have been the look on their face, but I said, would you prefer us to use the term partner or collaborator or just our friend? And there was such relief in that response of being called a collaborator, because based on people's bylaws and their policies within their system, they can be bound by the system. So I have found it to be just very helpful to approach it more of building a relationship with you, and let's see how with a shared interest of supporting people with brain injury and their families, and importantly, those who are providing services and supports for our loved ones. But I just wanted to say that sometimes the big partnership term means that there's a commitment and it's long-term, and there might be financial expectations. And if we can get through all that muckety-muck stuff and just get down to sharing a conversation with a shared goal, I think that can change people's perspectives as you build relationships with your existing people.
I agree with you. This is Gabby speaking. I agree with you, Paula. It's so important to see this as not just like, okay, there's going to be money involved, because there's not always money available to do certain things, right? But there's still that level of respect, that thoughtfulness, that you are looking out for each other's, the best interest of each other's consumers, shared consumers at times, right? So how can I work towards eliminating or decreasing barriers to access to each other's services, right? It won't cost us anything to sit down and brainstorm ideas, review forms that might be getting in the way, or processes that we could have an impact on without tying dollars to it. There may be times where dollars need to be involved, but just think about all the different types of activities, as Terry brought up, that you can keep them involved, not just the one-time big, the cycle starts and then you set up contracts, but it's just like continuously there are things that you can contribute on an ongoing basis to stay abreast as to what each other is doing and support that work.
Gabby, you keep reminding me of both of you keep reminding me of examples that you guys do the same thing at the state level that we do at the federal level. What you just sparked in my mind. Part of my job is writing grant programs, not just the TBI program, which is one of my fabulous programs that I engage with, but for other new programs that come about as well. And I've been going back and forth about whether I wanted to see MOUs, memoranda of understanding, or if I just wanted to see some letters of commitment. And, after this, I kind of think all I need is a letter of commitment to get this piece of this project done. I don't need somebody to jump through the 1,000 hoops that it might take to collaborate with an MOU. So.
Just to give a funny example, totally off the wall, but it's clear expectations of, when I engage with some of our partners, our friends, our collaborators, I cut to the chase. I said, you need to know my end result is I want this for sustained learning for your teams, for your staff, for professional development. So how can we get there? But to be clear with those expectations is so important. So I would tell my kids, I want them to clean their room. I don't want it just so that I can close their bedroom door. I want their bed made. Today, I'll be happy. Make your bed, put your shoes in the closet, and hang your shirt up. And that jacket has a hook for it by the coat closet. And when I'm really clear, it's a lovely day. Now, mind you, that was a long ago example, but it's really just setting, and it's being courteous and friendly and polite. And I know that we are all professionals and we understand how to interact and navigate conversations, but it always bears repeating, because it's like the art of writing letters. It's, some things are just really, really important, and to build a relationship based on providing services and supports for somebody, I think you need the personal touch, the personal elements. I'll hush now.
And good experiences, Paula, you're like, juices are flowing. Good experiences with partners, it'll attract others to want to work with you. You know, a difficult partner, you're gonna get turned off. They'll be like, oh, I don't want to work with this person. But if you have a partner that you're working, you have a solid relationship, they're gonna advertise for you. They're gonna be like, you gotta come and work, you gotta come and work with this partner. So you're just gonna make it that much better for yourself, keeping them engaged, having these positive interactions, so that you can continue to build that network.
Hi, this is Stacia, and I was just going to say that for us, I talked about a partnership literally within the Department of Health, which is huge. And so I think it's really important to remember that you can develop some really meaningful relationships with people literally in your own backyard. Because with the brain injury program, us, and I'm sure other states, have the experience of being a very tiny little, there's 3 of us full-time working on brain injury and 2 very, very part-time consultants within the Behavioral Health Administration. So we have to really connect with others within our own administration so that we can kind of bring others into the know, so to speak, so that when they go out to their partners or to their collaborators, that they can say, you might want to benefit, or you may want to know about what's going on with brain injury because it's relevant to your work. So I think there's really is some benefit to fostering those relationships, even in the office, with the office down the hall.
Well, this is Paula again. Stacia, I so appreciate your comments. And it reminded me of, we never want this to happen, but when one of your network friends is touched personally with brain injury and they call you, it's the highest compliment that you can ever get. You may not have connected with this person for a couple of years, because it's not a personal thing that they're unable to take your relationship farther or your partnership farther. Many times it's the system with their hands tied. It's just how the system works. But there's nothing there, as Gabby had said, there's nothing better than having your partner share the work that you do and the passion with which you do it.
Yeah, I've had that experience.
But again, that takes from building those relationships. You might not hear from them for years, but or they send their friend or their neighbor or their coworker to you for this assistance. And it could be simple to navigate other systems, but that again is each one. It's another link of your networking, your partnering chain.
And Donna also is chiming in here. She said, I've had that experience more than a couple of times, Paula. Clearly something that everyone working in this service can relate to there.
And if you get a no, don't quit. Go back to it. It might be a timing thing. It's just not the right time for them. Circle back and stay with it, because sometimes just timing it just doesn't work out, but there will be an opportunity in the future. So just keep them in your radar.
Yeah, and I have found people love anything that doesn't cost them anything. So because part of the work that we do is training, I will propose or invite myself or other ways, wiggle my way into other systems. I've done a lot of training with our ADRCs, and it's really been a beneficial relationship. Once they get tuned into the brain injury channel, they will ask you to keep coming back.
So we have a few comments that have come in regarding the tip sheet again, what we were talking about just a minute ago there. Anne in the around the tip sheet says, I thought the way to outline levels of engagement was helpful. If there is a tool for assessing partner satisfaction, the group would like to share. I'd love to see that. No, I'd like to see that. And that is a really good idea, Anne. And then I think this is Laura. says, I appreciate how considerate you are to the language that you use, important points and good examples, simple adjustments with significant impact. I love that. That's fantastic. And then another comments just to the previous speakers who were saying it can also be very helpful and powerful to document and show success for the collaboration in the individuals that you collaborate to assist, showing how it works. That's a very good idea. Let's see, I do want to ask if we got a few more minutes, I think here. I do want to ask the group, anyone who's still looking at that tip sheet, if you are, we wanted to talk about maybe if there are any examples of sustainability that were not covered in the tip sheet, either sharing, and if folks could, say what they are, and if you have, a story behind it as well, we'd love to hear that. Did I break up again? All right. Are there any other questions from the folks in the chat box there? Anyone still typing? Okay, is there any other words of wisdom, any burning advice from the panelists? Anything you want to leave folks with that you haven't had a chance to share yet?
I think it's not so much I want to leave something. I have a question. I actually want to flip that question in its head, in that adding ideas for sustainability, we would love to hear, are there any challenges that in the things that we've offered that we haven't covered, so that we can consider on our end, how to address that issue in thinking with, the mindset of sustaining the work. So if there's any challenges that you face, whether it's unique to your the population, the subpopulation of brain injury that you're working with, or trying to work with a certain partner, if you could put that in there, we'll look at it and see if we can update this tip sheet with some suggestions.
Awesome. Well, we only have a few more minutes. Oh, someone's coming in saying in the chat here, domestic violence providers. Is that one that you're saying it is missing? See more of?
It's challenging. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I know we have a number of grantees that are working at the intersection of TBI and intimate partner violence and domestic violence as well. And, I imagine we'll see a lot more work from those folks. Sorry, I'm losing my connection here again. I'm just saying that a number of our grantees are working on the intersection of that work there, and it's definitely something we're going to see more of. I would say really at the state and at the federal level, see more of those connections because we're aware of them so much. All right. And April says, this has been so eye-opening as most of our partnerships are outside our one state agency. Thank you for all your hard work. And May says, great, thank you so much. I think now's about the time when I turn it on back to Tom. I know you missed him, and I think he's going to take us through an evaluation poll.
Hi, everybody. I'm back. Yes, I wanted to, we want to see the poll, I guess. Connor, if you could throw that up there on the screen. We've got some evaluation questions that you can help us with, and this is a great thing. Normally we give you, like if you come to a real in-person conference, we give you an evaluation sheet and we hope you email it to us, or we hope you'll send it to us or leave it after the thing. Now this way you just fill it out on the screen and it's all done. It's very simple, very quick, and it's really, really, really helpful. And I'm not going to do it right now because that would be distracting, but wanted to give you a few minutes to do that. And while you're doing that, I do want to remind you there are 3 more TBI Tuesday sessions coming up. They are not all in March. One of them is in April. So that is just three additional weeks. While you're doing that, this is a reminder to make sure you register for those, and we'll show you those in a minute. But also, if you have any suggestions for future webinar topics, if you have any suggestions for how we can improve these webinars, if you have any ideas about Dana's playlist, if you have ideas about other topics you would like us to cover, these webinars are, the topics for the next 3 are set, but we are always looking for other ideas to build on, and looking for the current trends and things that are happening in the stakeholder community and in the TBI community. So, yes, and there's a TARC website. I think Terry just threw it up, TARC email up on the. If you have any questions, Terry says, or ideas about future webinar topics, please send it to tbitarc@hsri.org. And now you'll see up on the screen the future TBI sessions as they are marked currently. So next week, March 23rd, Return to Learn, Equal Access to Education for Students with Brain Injury. And remember, each of these sessions you need to register for separately. If you'll get the link, if you have the link for today's session, you have the link for today's session. You don't have a link for any other session other than today. Justice for All on March 30th, serving individuals with brain injury across the justice system. And then on April 6th, maximizing the effectiveness of advisory boards through full participation. And that's really about survivor engagement. How do we engage people with TBI, the people that we are serving? How do we engage them in a person-centered way in the mechanisms of the service system? And so that's a really, really important topic. And I think, let me just look at my notes. Big thanks today. Big thanks, Dave Boyer and Joseph Lugo, our special guests, our grantee presenters, Kenesha Tate, Maggie Ferguson, Scott Collins, Stasia Edmondson, Gabby Lawrence Soto, Jola, and I'm going to go for this because I love this name, Ahami Oji. Jolayemi Ahami Oji. Did I get it? I don't know. If I didn't, she'll text me later. Ashley Bridgman and Paula Denslow from Tennessee. Big thanks, huge thanks to our staff, Dana Fink, Rebecca Ellison, and Wilma Roberts, the grantee staff, the TBI TARC staff, Judy Detmer, Maria Crowley, Terry Gamacho Gonzalez, and Connor Bailey. Huge thanks. Connor is the foundation upon which we all are able to do what we do. Big thanks to everybody. Thank you again. Thanks for coming. Please come next week. Remember to register, and we will see you later. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.